Well, Alexander was still a major figure in this. All the allies came together in Paris this time. The defeat of France was complete. And they started to form an organization. Now, this was at the leadership and behest of Alexander, and the organization he wanted to set up and started out was a virtual League of Nations. This is long before Wilson was ever heard of. A real League of Nations. But unfortunately, Alexander was becoming immersed in his belief system. And he called this the Holy Alliance. And he couched his grand design in such sticky religiosity that none of the major figures in this great debate would take him seriously. Metternich of Austria and Talleyrand of France and Castlereagh of England, they all thought him a nut, a crackpot, a religious crackpot. And so they did not take him seriously. And he realized that he was being ignored. They were going on without him, just carving up things to suit themselves. This hurt him deeply. Somebody had come into his life in the middle of all of this. Somebody new and different. Her name was Julie von Krüdener, Baroness von Krüdener. She was 42 years old. She was a Livonian, not a Russian. She'd married a Russian ambassador. Many years her senior. It was not a love match. And even though she bore him a son, I think a daughter, they were not very close. She had lovers. She had written a novel called Valerie. It was a real bodice ripper. Everybody read that book. It was lurid. Whew. When she entertained, she would give her guests dinner and so on, and then afterwards she would perform for them exotic shawl dances. Oh yeah. She was quite a character. She had involved herself in Moravian pietism. Pietism was sweeping the European world at that time. It was a little bit like the Adventists of today, if any of you are familiar with Adventism. She had been a follower of Alexander for several years, writing to him. The Empress, by the way, read her letters to Alexander. He never met her, and this soothed his headaches. They were really interesting letters. She had never met him, but she looked upon him as the white angel of salvation for Europe, and that he was going to defeat the devil, Napoleon. So she was his fan, if you will. And she hadn't met him until one of his trips through Germany. He stayed in Heilbronn for several weeks, and the embassy that he occupied, she rented the house next door. And she found out one day that he was in his garden meditating. So she crawled over the wall behind the building and met him. That's the way you do, right, girls? And they got along famously. I mean, her introduction may have been a bit strange, but she was saying everything. He knew who she was by now. And she said just what he needed to comfort him. He was so distraught and so depressed by what was going on that he needed this comfort. She gave it to him. Pretty soon they were spending long evenings in prayer on their knees in her apartment. He got housemaid's knee from this. Well, eventually the great meeting of the states and their representatives came to a conclusion on the Champ de Mars in Paris that summer, and everybody was there, all the important emperors and kings and all the rest of it. And standing right next to the Emperor Alexander was this strange, simply dressed woman, looking sepulchrally saint-like. Who was this woman? Everybody wanted to know. Well, by now, of course, she was famous. In 1816, Alexander, disillusioned now with the whole thing, decided to go back to St. Petersburg and retire. He asked her if she'd go with him. She gracefully declined, saying she would join him shortly, but she had some business to attend to. So we went back to St. Petersburg, and she went on with her lover. They never were lovers, Alexander and Krüdener, with her lover, and practicing religion without a license wherever she wasn't turned out by the police all over Europe, and making book on her relationship to the emperor. She was a famous celebrity. Well, pretty soon this wore thin, and she decided she would go back. And she returned. She had never lived in Russia, but she now went to St. Petersburg to join the emperor. 1821. Well, he wouldn't see her. He was so deep in depression and melancholy, he didn't want to see anybody. But he saw to it that she was very graciously treated, given a nice income and a villa to occupy in the beach resort of Tagonrog in the Black Sea, which was where all the imperials went to vacation. And so she went there to live. And she stayed and lived out the rest of her short life. She died 3 years later, I guess it was, in Tagonrog. Madame von Krüdener was a kind of cross between Amy Semple MacPherson and Isadora Duncan, I think you might say. Quite a character.